Good morning. So, as usual on Mondays, let me start doing the problems on the last quiz, on the last homework. And then, if you have time, you can work on problems as you want, making yourself ready for the quiz on Thursday. Okay, so the first question we are supposed to solve, this is mainly, of course, on the topic of limits and absolute values. Actually, some of you did a very good job, so you are practicing. That's very good, thank you. But let us read the question now. So the limit of x squared plus 2x over x squared minus 4 when x approaches minus 2 is what? So we want to calculate. So mainly we want to calculate limits. Okay, so let me review what we learned. So the question number one, the limit that I have to calculate is limit of x squared plus 2x. And then I have what? X squared minus 4, x goes to minus 2. Okay, of course, for E-level questions, you will face limits that you just put the number there and you are done. Okay, but for the home assignment, as I told you, these are concentrated on I-level questions, so I have always given you the problematic ones. The problematic ones is that you put minus 2 again, so you have to conditional your brain in this way. Whenever you want to calculate the limit, first you have to test what type of problem I have. So I put minus 2 to power 2 is positive 4, 2 times minus 2, negative 4, 4 minus 4, 0. So far, no problems. The problem arises when you put minus 2 in the denominator as well, that one also becomes 0. So it becomes 0 over 0. So some of you might still remember that I told you 0 over 0 is a little bit of a bad terminology used in math books, but they mean infinitesimally small over infinitesimally small. Whenever this happens, I am in trouble, and that is called an indeterminate form. But these are for the people who care about understanding deeper, but you just need to learn the trick to solve the problem. And what was the method is factorization. Yes? So what I will do, I will factorize the numerator. So hopefully you know that. This is a very simple factorization. So I just pull x out. And what is the pattern in the denominator? It's just a conjugate rule. So it becomes x minus 2, x plus 2. And then x goes to minus 2. X approaches to minus 2, or some people say x tends to minus 2. All of them are correct. And then you see that this factor and that factor are common factors, so they can be simplified. And of course, if it is an exam that you have to write your full solution, it doesn't hurt if you write it properly. I would prefer to write it once more time. But of course, in this exam, what matters, in this home assignment, what matters, the final answer. Okay, and then remember, as soon as something is simplified from the numerator and denominator, it means that your problem is solved. Okay, so how? I put minus 2 back here. What happens? It becomes minus 2, x is minus 2, and this is no longer problematic. So it becomes minus 2 divided by minus 4. And the answer is 1/2. By the way, in the quiz, if you want to type 1/2, remember this. You just type it like this. So remember where you can find this key on your keyboard. And one extremely important thing I remember, some of you might have switched the keyboard to English. And then when you start the exam, it will be in English keyboard, and then it will become problematic for you. So make sure that when it is using exam.net, make sure that the language of your device is indeed Swedish, and then go for this. Yes?
In the quiz, how are we going to...
Let us talk about quiz later, okay? Because I want to record it and publish it, so let us do it later. But I want you to remember this is the division key. Okay, of course, in this case, probably I will also anticipate that some of you will write this or some of you will write that, because this is possible. But if the answer is 1/3, that is 1/3. There is no approximation for that, so you have to keep it exact. So I don't think that you face a big problem here. Is that understandable? Any questions? Okay, so let us go to the next problem. So the next problem is also another limit, but this one you have to learn what I told you before. So this includes the third sign. So let me write this one. We want to calculate this limit, and this third sign, this symbol is called the third sign or radical sign. So if you want to actually calculate that, what was the trick? Do you remember from the lesson? So question number 2 we are supposed to calculate this limit. So the limit of square root of 4 plus h minus, what is that, 2 over h again. So, and let me do it always. I have trained my mind to my brain to do it immediately like this. I put 0 to see if I am in trouble. So if I put 0 here, then it becomes square root of 4, which is 2 minus 2, 0, and the denominator also vanishes, so it means that I am in trouble. It is infinitesimal is small over infinitesimal is small. But if you want to solve this, we haven't studied factorizations of this type, so we have to use a different trick. And I mean, even if you learn all tricks for factorization, the method is not called factorization. Do you remember what was the trick? I repeat my limit, but I have to rescale it by 1 in a fancy way. So what do you remember? What was that? I have to multiply the numerator and the denominator by an expression that forms the conjugate pattern with the expression including the third sign. It doesn't matter if the third sign is in the numerator or if the third sign is in the denominator. So you have to rescale it by, in this case, the square root of 4 plus h plus 2, and the same thing divided by the same thing. Yes? Again, I want you to understand that. First of all, I have a right to keep this equality, because if I ask you what this number is a fraction whose numerator and denominators are the same, so it is 1. And if I multiply my number by 1, I haven't changed anything. But why this is beneficial? Because this one and that one make the conjugate rule. So what happens, let me write it in full detail so that if you have forgotten, you remember that as well. So what you do, you will write the first one squared minus the second one squared because of the conjugate rule. And then I just multiply them, and I told you don't expand this because it is already in product form, and to simplify, I need product form. Okay? Is that understandable so far? Okay, and then you know what to do. Square root and this power of 2 cancel one another, so it becomes what? 4 plus h minus 2 to the power of 2 is 4. And then I have, again, I copy and paste the denominator. And then I would see that, let me just not be lazy for the exam so that we can continue. And I will write 4 and 4 are canceled. And I am left with h over h times the square root of 4 plus h plus 2. And then what happens so far, nothing has been simplified from the numerator and denominator, so still the problem is standing. Yes, I couldn't solve the problem yet, but now these h's are gone, so this one and that one are left. So what happens, let me write it once more. So this becomes the limit of 1 over square root of 4 plus h plus 2, and h goes to 0. And now I replace h with 0. So what happens? So it becomes 1 over square root of 4 plus 2. But what is the answer? This is just 1 over 2 plus 2, 4. So that's the answer, correct answer to the problem. So remember, for factorization, I don't think you face any problem because we practice on these things a lot, and these are probably among the simplest possible ones. But for having a third sign, you need to remember this trick. Otherwise, you might be in trouble. Okay? So now let us go to the next question. The next question, again, I am supposed to calculate a limit. X goes to minus 1/2. Okay. If you haven't done that, at least you can think a little bit about this problem. So I have given it in a way that the factorization is a little bit lengthy, but it is very standard. So if you know how to factorize a quadratic polynomial, you shouldn't face any problems, but it might be a little bit lengthy, okay? Because these are the quadratic polynomials with this coefficient not equal to 1, yes? Okay. Okay, so this is my limit. Again, technically speaking, we have to put this in these two to see if I am in trouble or not. If I'm not in trouble, that's the answer. But I will be in trouble, yes? The people who have done that, they already know. So if I put minus 1/2 here, it becomes positive 1 over 4 times 2 is 0.5. 0.5 plus 1 is 1.5, and this becomes minus 1.5. So the numerator becomes 0. And if I check it here, it becomes again 1 over 4 times 2 is 0 0.5, 0 0.5 minus 20, minus 3 is minus 2.5, and this becomes plus 2.5. So again, I am in trouble. Yes? So I have to factorize it. And this you have to do it patiently. It is a long problem, but it's not a hard problem. Yes? If you can do it in your head with this guessing method, of course, guessing method for having these two is a little bit harder, but if you are practiced, you can do it in any way that you like. The worst case scenario is that you solve it, yes? So let us do it in the worst case scenario. So what I will do, I will use this formula. Do you remember? The formula was ax squared plus bx. That's a very essential formula. You shouldn't forget about that. A times x minus x1 times x minus x2. This will give me the factorization of my quadratic polynomial. x1 and x2 are the roots, and a is just this number. So I have to patiently calculate the roots. Yes, so what I will do, I will write 2x squared plus 3x plus 1. I myself put it equal to 0, so I want you to know there is no putting 0 there in the problem. The reason I am putting it equal to 0 because I want to use this formula. To use this formula, I need the roots. Okay? And then I prefer to use ABC formula. I will not explain it that much because both formulas are available. I will just read it for you. So let me write the formula once in front of you so that you can see what I'm doing. The formula which will be in the formula sheet is this one. I told you whenever this one is not 1 and this is not even, I will probably use my ABC formula. So minus b is minus 3 plus or minus square root of 3 to power 2 is 9 minus 4 times this number times that number, which becomes 8. Yes? And then divided by 2 times this number, which is 4. So what I will do, it becomes minus 3 plus or minus 9 minus 8 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1, and then I divide it by 4. Then you get 2 answers. It doesn't matter which one you call x1, which one you call x2. So let us call x1 the one with plus sign. So it becomes minus 3 plus 1 minus 2 over 4, which becomes minus a half. And then x2 is minus 3 minus 1 is minus 4 divided by 4, which is negative 1. And then the only thing that I have to do is to put this in this formula, okay? So I will say that my expression, which is 2x squared plus 3x plus 1, is equal to a, in this problem a is 2, x minus x1. I have a minus in the formula. x1 has an extra minus, so minus minus becomes plus 1/2. And then x minus x2, again, I have an extra minus sign, so it becomes plus 1. Yes? The only thing that you have to remember, I hope that everyone remembers, I told you that if there is a fraction, you have to get rid of it. And usually this always works. So these two can be multiplied here or there. But of course, in this case, I prefer to multiply it here, because if I decide to multiply it here, it is technically not wrong, but 1 over 2 still remains. So to get rid of it, I decide to multiply 2 here and there, and then finally I have my factorization. So it becomes 2x plus 1, and then I have x plus 2. Okay. So you see, it's a very, very standard problem. This you have to know. Even might be I give you this and I ask you to factorize. This is not A-level question. The factorization is not considered A-level question because it's very standard routine. And I will do the same thing here patiently, yes? Okay, so what I will do, so I will, this time I will put this one equal to 0 and try to find the roots. So the formula sheet is already, so the ABC formula is in front of you. I'm just using it. Minus b becomes positive 5 plus or minus b squared, which is 25, minus 4 times this times that. It is a minus here, so it becomes plus 4 times 2 times this one is 24. 4 times 2 times 3. And then divided by 2 times a, which is 4 again, but that is also a good, nice number because 25 plus 24 is 49. Square root of 49 is just 7. Yes? And then I will have two roots again. So one, I call it x1, the other one, I call it x2. x1 is 5 plus 7 divided by 4, which is 3. And the other one is 5 minus 7, which is minus 2 divided by 4, which is minus a. And then I will write the same formula again, yes? So a 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 becomes what? A is 2, x minus x1, x minus this one is 1/2. Yes? Okay, but again, you remember 1/2 is a fraction, so I decide to multiply 2 here now. So it becomes what? I copy and paste the first term. I multiply 2 there, it becomes 2x plus. So you see, it might be an EA level question, but it is composed of several simpler questions. And that is more or less usually the case, unless the question needs a very outside box thinking, you know. Those questions you rarely get in standard exams, okay? So you have to know how to do things you have already learned. You might get at most one question. In the national exam, it's also the same. You don't get a lot of questions of that nature, okay? So the question mark finally, which is my limit, becomes the limit x goes to minus 1/2. So what do you think I will do now? I will actually use what I found. I will use this for the numerator. So it is 2x plus 1 multiplied by x plus 1. I will use this in the denominator. So it becomes x minus 3 and then 2x plus 1. And then you see what was the culprit for this problem. Yes, this was the culprit. This appears here and there. So I simplify them. 1 is left. In the formal exam, just don't be lazy, do it once more. So it becomes x plus 1 over x minus 3. And x goes to minus 1/2. Okay, so I put minus 1/2 there. So it becomes minus 1/2 plus 1 minus 1/2 minus 3. And for this level of numbers, calculator will not be available. So even in the national exam, you have to know. So for me, it's better to multiply everything by 2 to get rid of fractions. But I have to be, there is only one expression, so I multiply the numerator and denominator by 2. If I multiply this by 2, it becomes minus 1. If I multiply this by 2, it becomes 2. If I multiply this by 2, it becomes minus 1. If I multiply this by 2, it becomes minus 6. So the numerator becomes 1, the denominator becomes minus 7. And of course, I prefer to write minus 1 over 7, but that one is also okay. So the answer to this problem is simply minus 1 over 7. Any questions? Yes? Okay, so let us go to the next problem. So here, I am preparing you for, I saw there are some exercises in the book. What is the big difference here? Let L be this limit, then L minus 2, L to the power of minus 2 is what? The reason I wrote this for you, because I also saw in the book, in this chapter, you have some exercises in which you have two letters involved in your function. One is x, one is h. I don't know how many of you have done the exercises in the book yet, but you will see these type of problems there. And of course, I'm also preparing you for the next chapter, which is the derivative. In the derivative, these kind of limits appear more or less all the time. So, but I want you to understand what is going on. You know, here I have x and h in my limit. Both of them, technically speaking, are English alphabet letters. Yes, x is an English alphabet letter, h is also there. But be careful. In mathematics, we usually call them variables. But this one, when you look at this limit, which one is the real variable? Yes? H is the real variable, not x. Why? Because I am not able to do something with x. This limit means that I am making h smaller and sending it to 0. I am not doing anything with x. So even though x, technically speaking, can also be considered as a variable, but as far as this limit is concerned, this is not a variable. It's a fixed number. Whatever it is, I don't know, but it's a fixed number. But h is my variable. So this limit is not a limit in x variable. It's a limit in h variable. Of course, the rule of thumb is to look here. What letter is there, that is the variable. Even if you have hundreds of other letters, the letter that appears here in below this limit, which is h in this case, is my variable. Okay? So now I think I will give you a little bit of time to think. I also start erasing the board, so don't waste your time. At least think about it. Every rule you should already know. This is one of those limits with the search sign. Yeah, so the technique should be the same. Okay, now let us do this one. Again, I put h equals to 0 to see what type of limit is this. When I put h equal to 0, I get the square root of x. Remember it in your head. If I put h equal to 0, it also becomes the square root of x. The square root of x, whatever x is, minus the square root of x is 0. And then I put h equal to 0, that's also 0. So that's also 0 over 0. But this is a 0 over 0 type with third sign. So you have to remember the trick for this third sign. So what should I do? I copy and paste everything more or less, but I have to rescale it, yes? I have to rescale it by 1, but in a fancy way. How should I multiply it? I have to multiply by something and divide by the same thing to not change anything at all, but on the other hand, it becomes useful. And I told you the rule of thumb is to write the one that makes a conjugate pattern with what you have with third signs. Okay? So what is that one? Yes, so it is the square root of x plus h, square root of x minus h. Here I have negative sign, so to make it conjugate, I have to put positive sign. If you in the original limit have the negative positive sign, then you have to put the negative sign. So that's the only recipe, yes? Okay, and then you divide immediately by the same thing. You don't even need to think. But the next step is not multiplying case by case. It is not technically wrong. You can multiply this one, multiply that one, multiply, but this is too long. But we did it for making a conjugate rule. So it becomes the first one squared, because if you have the box minus the circle and the box plus the circle, you will get y box squared minus circle squared. So I'm giving the rule of box here. These two are the same boxes. And I give the rule of circle to these, they are circles. So that's the conjugate rule. So it becomes the first one squared. This in exam, you don't have to write it. You can do it in your head. Minus the second one squared. But I want to make sure that everyone understands. So let me be patient and do it step by step. So h goes to 0. And then h times that, I told you, don't start multiplying them. It is not wrong to multiply this here and there. But to simplify, I need product form. So let us keep the product form as much as I can. But then I continue. Everyone hopefully knows that this power of 2 will kill that square root. So it becomes x plus h minus the second one is also x minus h. This is a very common mistake. Yes, people might write like this. But what is the correct way? You have to put a pair of brackets or consider it in your head. So in your calculations, you do it faster. You are more happy if you do it faster. But if you think you make mistakes, do it step by step. So h square root of x plus h plus square root of x minus h. And then what happens? You open it up. X plus h is just x plus h. I multiply the minus sign. The first one becomes negative, but the second one becomes positive because this minus sign goes here and there. And the denominator, I just copy and paste. And then h goes to 0. And then here, this variable x and that variable x are gone. H plus h is added. So it becomes 2h. So this becomes the limit of 2h over h square root of x plus h plus the square root of x minus h. Yes? H goes to 0. But now, I can simplify the h factors, yes, because this is a product, so h is a factor. This is also a product, so h is a factor, and that is a common factor, so it can be simplified. So what is left for me is the limit of 2 over square root of x plus h plus a square root of x minus h, x goes to 0. And then I put x 0, not, sorry, this is not x, this was h. I have to put h equals to 0, and then everything will work fine. So if I put h equal to 0, it becomes x plus 0, which is x, so it becomes the square root of x. If I put h equal to 0, again, it becomes the square root of x. But hopefully you know that a square root of x plus another one becomes 2 square root of x. And then what happens, these 2 and that 2 are cancelled. So that is the twist I made to this A-level question. But of course, if I see this in your paper, if there are 3 points for this question, you get 2.55 here. Okay? The next one, I want to calculate L to power negative 2. So how should I calculate that? So my L is 1 over square root of x. Okay, so how should I calculate L to power minus 2? Yes, L to power, the question mark is L to power minus 2, means 1 over, hopefully you remember from Ma3c, the formulas are there, but hopefully you know that this much. L to power minus 2 can be written in that way. But now, if I ask you, 1 is just 1, what is L squared? This is L. So what is L squared? Is this fraction squared. But this means 1 squared, which is 1, a square root of x squared, which is x. And now 1 over x is what? X. So that's the answer that you have to provide. So you see, the typing is minimal. You just type letter x in the answer. Any questions? Okay. So let us go to the next problem. I think the next problem should be an absolute value problem, yes. Consider the following equation. This is an equation in which you see the absolute value sign, and the sum of the roots of this equation is what? And then I have written it in red that you have to find the solutions and add them up. Yes?
Sorry, this reminded me of another question. Do you remember that week, long time ago, for GeoGebra?
Yes?
The GeoGebra question, we were supposed to write the absolute signs.
Yes?
In GeoGebra, how do you write those absolute signs? I couldn't find it in the...
Oh, okay, I will do that, but not for this one. This is just for this quiz, okay? So, we want to solve this one and then add them up. Okay, so we have to find the roots. I think this is also a very standard problem. I don't want to make them so complicated because I haven't seen a very complicated question in the national exam. Absolute values can be more or less complicated if you want to make them, but I don't want to make it so complicated because you don't have, as far as I saw in the national exam, you don't have that much complicated questions. Okay, so let me pause record. So, how should I solve this problem? I don't think that's a very hard problem. Everyone hopefully sees that the first step is to move 5 to the other side. So do it in your head. What happens? Be careful. A common mistake is to consider this as a pair of brackets. In this case, if you multiply 2 inside, it is a valid way to do it. But because we haven't studied those properties of absolute values, you have to justify why this is correct. So absolute value is not a pair of brackets. Okay, for example, if I say 2 times absolute value of x plus 1, if some of you writes absolute value of 2x plus 2, even without understanding that, that is correct. But if someone writes minus 2x plus 1 and multiplies minus 2 inside and write minus 2x minus 2, that's wrong. Okay, so it's not a pair of brackets. And because in the Ma3c we are not supposed to delve very deeply into the notion of absolute value sign, so please make sure that what you are doing is based on what we have learned during the lesson, or you really understand what you are doing in a higher level. That's also okay. If you do it properly, I will of course give you the points. But be careful, this is not a pair of brackets. It's absolute value sign. Okay, so the correct way of doing, if you want to learn this one, you can multiply positive numbers in but you cannot multiply negative numbers in. If you want to multiply a negative number in, you have to keep the minus sign out and then multiply the 2 in. Minus sign will be left behind a pair of absolute value signs. But let me talk about that later, okay? So the first thing I will do, I will move it to the other side. It becomes what? 8. And then I divide everything by 2 to get rid of this 2. It becomes what? 4. Okay, now you need to know that you have 2 answers, not 1 answer. One answer is, this happens under 2 circumstances. Either what you have inside is exactly 4, because absolute value of 4 is 4, but also there is another option, which is minus 4. Because if the inside is minus 4, absolute value of minus 4 is still 4. So these are 2 things that you have to be careful about. And then this is the very simple one now. I move this to the other side, so it becomes 2x equals to 3. So x becomes 3 over 2. This is one solution. And then I will solve this one. I move this to the other side, so 2x becomes minus 5. And then x becomes minus 5 over 2. Yes? But the problem is asking you about the sum of these numbers. So 3 over 2 plus minus 5 over 2. This is what is wanted in this problem. So 3 minus 5 is minus 2 divided by 2. So it is minus 1. So that is the answer that you have to provide there in that answer. Yes? Okay, but now that you have asked, let me also show you, hopefully everything works fine. As you ask this question on GeoGebra, if you go to this virtual keyboard, this is the absolute value sign. And you see that? Yes. And of course, if you want to solve equations, you have to go to CAS view. So I will go to CAS view, for example. Let us do this with GeoGebra as well. So I will say solve. Yes? Of course, in this problem, you're not supposed to solve because that's an equation in X. I just type it. So 2, and then I use this absolute value. What is inside? It is 2 space X plus 1. Then outside absolute value, I have minus 5 equals to 3. Is that right? Was it right? Yes, it's minus, it's equal to 3. And then I press enter. So these are the numbers that you get for this one. So anyway, absolute value is in the virtual keyboard. But for typing, if for some reason absolute value does not work, you don't have access to virtual keyboard, the standard letters are ABS. ABS is an abbreviation for absolute value. Usually, sometimes for some reason I have seen the virtual keyboard disappears and you cannot find it. In that case, absolute value is ABS of X. Okay? Any questions here now? Okay. If X satisfies this inequality, then the number of integer values that 6x plus 1 can assume is what? So do you understand what I mean here? Yes? The number of integer. Integer means what? Means heel tall, yes? So the number of integer values that 6x plus 1 can assume. It means that it can take. Yes? So you solve this inequality, and then you, let me solve it for you. But I want to, first of all, with the English translation. So I am not looking for any solutions. I am looking for the number of solutions. How many? Okay? I'm asking about the number of solutions. Okay, so what is the problem? The problem is 2x, 2 absolute value of 1 minus 3x less than or equal to what? Less than or equal to 1. And then I am looking for the integer values that this expression can assume. Okay, of course, the problem is clear. First of all, you have to solve the inequality. I will do it. I don't want to give any twist to not confuse you. Okay, but later I will also tell you that if I want to solve it, I will do it a little bit faster by doing one trick first. Okay, but let us just pretend that we don't know that trick. So what we do, I need to solve this inequality in a way that I described during the lesson. So I have to divide by 2. It becomes less than or equal to 1/2. Do you remember? And then I told you what was the geometrical interpretation of absolute value of something in the box. It is the distance of that number in the box to the origin. Yes, do you remember? So if I say, for example, absolute value of x is supposed to be less than 5, it means I am interested in all numbers on the x-axis whose distance to the origin is less than 5. So here is 5. So of course every number here is acceptable because the distance from every one of these numbers to the origin is less than 5. But that's not the whole story, yes? There are other points here, up to minus 5. The distance between these points to the origin are still less than 5. The distance, absolute value means distance, okay? So this means that I am interested in an absolute value less than or equal to 1/2. So the distance of this number to the origin should be where? Should lie somewhere between two limits. From above, it cannot go beyond 1/2, but from below, it cannot go beyond below minus 1/2. It cannot go beyond 1/2, it cannot go below minus 1/2. Because if it does, then the distance of this number to the origin will be greater than 1/2. So this number should be sandwiched between these numbers. The first recipe is that I told you that I don't like fractions. I multiply everything by 2 to get rid of fractions. It is not necessary, but it is useful. Okay, so it becomes 2 minus 6x, and then this becomes less than or equal to 1. If you want to solve the inequality, you have to isolate your x. So the next step is to get rid of this 2. So I add minus 2 to all sides. This becomes minus 3. This becomes minus 6x, and this becomes minus 1, minus 1. I added minus 2 to all of them to get rid of these 2. But still x is not isolated. So I have to isolate x. To isolate x, I have to divide by minus 6. But be careful, when you divide, from Math 1c, you learned when you divide an inequality by a negative number, what you have to do? You have to flip the sign, yes? Yes? You can flip the sign. My preference is to write it the other way around. I always prefer to work with less than or equal to. This is more common, but that's completely okay. But minus 3 over minus 6 is what? 1/2 is greater than or equal, minus 6 and minus 6 are gone, and then greater than or equal to 1 over 6. I prefer, instead of saying 1/2 is greater than or equal to x greater than or equal to 1 over 6, I will write it the other way around, but that is up to you. For me, I don't know, I am used to this left side symbol. If you want, you keep it like this. If you want, you keep it like this. That is the solution to this inequality. Okay? Now the twist to the problem, they haven't asked you to solve this inequality. You are supposed to answer how many integers this combination can take if this is the case. We learned that this is the case only if this happens, but it tells me something about x. I need to know something about 6x plus 1. So what do? I multiply everything by 6. So this becomes 1, and this becomes 3. I add 1 to it, it becomes 2. 6x plus 1 is less than or equal to 4. Are you with me or not? Okay, so if I ask you to solve inequality, either you answer this one, you get the full points, or you answer this one. The twist to the problem is a little bit probably different, yes? So, this is what I want. It means that if this occurs, then 6x plus 1 is somewhere from 2, including 2, up to 4, including 4. But I am also talking about integer values. Which ones are acceptable? 2 is acceptable because of equality and being an integer. The next one is 3. 3 is between 2 and 4. And the next one is 4. Yes? 4 is also acceptable. So how many integers you see? 3. And the question is asking you the number of integers. Okay? So the number of integers is just 3. You put it here like this. But of course, this last part is minor, okay? The majority of the problem is this one. Before finishing this one, I just tell you this and then you're done. I told you one thing, one question from you. If I tell you absolute value of a minus b and absolute value of, so a plus b and b plus a, are they the same or not? Absolute value of a plus b and absolute value of b plus a. They are the same. Why? Because a plus b is the same as b plus a, so their absolute values are also the same. But if I say the same question for negative, what do you think? Are they still the same? This time, a minus b and b minus a are not the same. So this question is more sensible. I ask you, a minus b, absolute value of a minus b and absolute value of b minus a are the same or not? Yes or no? Why not think? So we had this, I told you several times. What is the difference between this one? This is an important trick in the previous lesson. Are they the same? No, but they differ by a minus sign. So now absolute value of a minus, these two numbers are not the same, I agree, but they don't differ that much. They differ just by a minus sign. And when you are taking the absolute value, it doesn't matter. That absolute value will cancel that minus sign. So absolute value of a minus b and absolute value of b minus a are quite the same. If you knew this, you could flip it from the very beginning. Okay? Then instead of having 1 minus 3x, you will have 3x minus 1. But then you will not be bothered with this negative coefficient of x, so that you have to be careful, flip it around and flip it back. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. You see, I just followed what I told you last time and it worked. But if you have the capacity of remembering more things, that's also a good twist to learn. First of all, from conceptual point of view, it's very important to know absolute value of a minus b and absolute value of b minus a are exactly the same, even though a minus b and b minus a are not the same. If someone asks you why, then you will say because a minus b and b minus a, even though they are not equal, but they differ only by minus sign. An absolute value kills the minus sign. For example, absolute value of minus 5 is the same as absolute value of 5. So when it comes to absolute values, minus signs does not matter in that way. Yes? Okay, I don't want to confuse you because probably, for example, I have seen questions of this type in the national exam. They ask you, for example, what is 1 minus 3? What is the answer to absolute value of 1 minus 3? Yes? 2. I have seen some people write 1 plus 3. Because, of course, you are right, absolute value of minus 3 is 3, but there is no rule to tell you, you are inventing rules, you know? There is no rule to tell you that absolute value of a plus b is equal to absolute value of a plus absolute value of b. If this was true, or if it were true, then yes, this calculation makes sense. But this is unfortunately not true. Okay? So the only way that you can solve this E-level question in a national exam is to calculate 1 minus 3 first. It becomes minus 2, and everyone hopefully knows that absolute value of minus 2 is 2. So your answer is completely correct. Okay? So if you learn not to invent rules, you will get better points. Yes? But some of you immediately, when you don't know how to solve, invent a new rule and continue your own rule. Okay? Any questions about this? Okay, so I will stop this video. And by the way, do you know that I upload them regularly? Can you find them? Okay, so you are taking photo for your own sake, but you know that these are available. Yes? Okay, good.